So you think we go right up through this gully and then cut around that way? My name is Dave Morrow. 9 months of each year, I live in the wild, surrounding me in all directions, thousands of miles of pure wilderness. No roads, no people, no internet, no photography hotspots or social media likes, no top 10 tips to help you out. These things don't matter here. They never did and never will. I come here to challenge my fears and improve my craft, landscape photography. My backpack is filled with 2 weeks of food, camera gear and tripod, a shelter, a topo map and compass, and a GoPro to document the experience. I travel by foot. This is all I need. This series teaches my entire image creation process, the constant struggle to learn and improve, the drive to solve problems and create better photographs. My goal is to teach you what I know and the path used to get there. I challenge you to abandon the herd, leave the hive, think for yourself, stop chasing internet fame, followers, and likes, blaze a new trail, create new ideas, teach others your path, devote every second to your craft. So thanks for watching, and welcome to the Wilderness Photography Expeditions. If you look right back there, you can see that huge cloud bank, and that's where we started at this morning. So we were driving up to the trailhead and it was just pouring. It's like a jungle down there. And then slowly we climbed out from under the cloud layer, and right now it looks like it's gonna be a really good time. See up there, starting to see the first touches of the snow line. If you look right back through there, that waterfall is completely frozen. So it's been getting pretty cold out here, just not a whole lot of snow yet. If I hike up right over this knoll, you can see the first good glimpses of this mountain range that we're gonna climb up into, and it looks like it just got a really nice fresh layer of snow. Turn this around, meter it so you can see, but hiking right along this valley. The river's right down there. Then we're gonna cut behind this range, and there's a basin right up behind it. So where we're aiming to put our tent, at least where we put it before when we were up in this area, is prime time for shooting. We got about 4.5 miles down, 2,100 feet of gain, and I think about the same to go still. The first time we were up in this area, we saw this lake on a topographic map that is right up that really steep gully and just tucked back over the edge. And it lets you see this whole range up through here. But we had this really good idea that instead of going around to the other side where it looks like there's mostly forest and we could climb up to that lake off trail, we were like, all right, let's just go up that little gully right there. So we're climbing up through here, and then halfway up this gully, I go off to the left on that scree field where there's snow, and then Iron goes off to the right, and we're both yelling back and forth at each other for, I don't know, like a half an hour, and it gets so steep we're just both sitting there like, what the hell, dude? But I ended up being down basically on my knees climbing to the top of that thing. Thankfully, the lake at the top was well worth it. I think we go right up through this gully and then cut around that way?
Yeah, right up that gully right there, and then we'll end up backtracking up to the top of that ridge.
Cool, let's do it. So that gully we were looking at is what we just came up right down through there. There's the river valley, and now we got up here, everything's starting to cloud up. You can see some peaks back through there. And then behind me, it's just all covered. Pretty good one back there too. But the goal is to head back over this next set of hills, and that's where the dream camp is that we have in mind. So we're just headed right back up this hill, cut that ridge line, and then we're there. Just finished my soup.
see, this is the same soup that I eat every day. So we call this the same soup as yesterday. But it's pretty good, actually. And then the Sawyer squeeze bottle filled with some whiskey. Black velvet, top shelf. Pretty good stuff as well, especially when it's freezing out. This is a must-have for any short winter trip. It'll change your life. But still keeping an eye out back there. Little bit of alpenglow, but really not much going on. Could potentially do some shooting that way if it clears up. Or I could potentially just sit in my tent, see how it looks out this way. So for the last 10 minutes, I've been just sitting over here watching the light change on all those peaks right back behind me and dialing in the composition, but I don't know. Sometimes I just come out here and I shoot because I did all the work to get up here. I don't really think I'm going to get an image out of it, but then once in a while I get lucky and something comes out of it. So that's why I've been shooting. See the composition back there? Shooting at f11, ISO 64, exposed to the right. And I think it's actually a pretty cool scene. Kind of balances on the bottom left. All those ice-covered trees. So really dark in the bottom left. And then that kind of holds the whole attention to that side. Then the back right and the top is just diffuse light, but these clouds back in here have some really cool details on them. And when they clear, those peaks in the upper top get some really nice alpenglow.
Alright, so let's take a quick second and look at this image, and I'm going to break down the composition so you can get a better idea, full screen, what I'm looking for. So whenever I'm looking for compositions in the field, there are a few things that I like to look for. And all of these things I have termed transitions. So a transition is anything that helps your eyes to move from one part of the photo to another part of the photo. So a transition could be between sharp detail, such as right here, to no detail, such as the clouds. So that will allow your eyes to move from this area to this area. A transition could be from a dark area in the image, such as here, to a much lighter area in the image. It could also be from a saturated area, such as here, to a desaturated area. When your eyes see anything that's different in the image, it will help them to move through that image much easier. So if you've ever seen an image that is really saturated all over, it's really hard to concentrate and really appreciate what's going on because the saturation is overwhelming. So in combination with selecting a color harmony, meaning two colors that lie directly across from each other on the color wheel, you can also choose transitions to help your photo work a lot better. So for this image, I always like to have what is called a leading line, starting the eye somewhere in the bottom of the image and working it up to the top of the image. So as a leading line, I could choose this line, and you'll see it kind of just outlines the transition from dark to light or from sharp to no sharpness at all. So there's a transition here, so I can easily use it if the viewer starts their eyes down here to bring them up into the top of the photo. I also have an anchor point over here of all this dark. I'll just call this A for anchor. An anchor is anything in the bottom left or right of the image, and I've just made up these terms, that kind of draws the eyes to begin with, so a place for the eyes to start, and shoot them out into the rest of the image. So if the anchor is dark or saturated, then I would want to move the eyes to a place that's lighter or desaturated. In this case, it's dark and desaturated, so it's easy for our eyes to move from here out into the rest of the image. They might move directly here, or they might catch this leading line, which shoots them up through the rest. So we also have areas in this image of interestingness. If I can, I like to break the areas up in the image into approximately a third. So let's say you have top third, and bottom third. And I don't use thirds to make my compositions. I don't really care about that. But a good rule of thumb is that if you have an interesting detail in the top, middle, and bottom, then you know your image is interesting. So in the top of this image, I have these peaks, which add a lot of interesting detail. In the midground, I have these clouds, as well as the trees. And then I have an anchor in the bottom, so this just grabs my attention. And then as soon as my attention is here, it shoots it out into the rest of the image, which is interesting. So that's kind of what I looked for when capturing this image out in the field. So let's jump back to the shooting technique.
So I'm just going to keep firing these off and see if I get lucky. I think tomorrow the game plan is to stay up here, but probably try to get up on some of these ridge lines if we can. Really have to watch for avalanches this time of year because there's been a lot of snow falling and it hasn't really settled. There hasn't been any sunny days since the last snowfall, so we'll see. But here's the first one I got. Actually looks pretty cool. I want to wait until those clouds move through there a little bit more so I can see that peak in the background. So a lot of times when I set up for shots like this up in the mountains, I'll get my composition all set up, my settings dialed in, and then as the cloud systems or weather systems move through, I'll take multiple different exposures, and then I'll have all these different cloud movements down in the valley or up by the peaks, and then I'll also have different light on the peaks. And since they're all the same composition, I can blend them all together, and from there I can normally get some really nice shots out of it. So the goal is to always get it in one shot if I can, but if it's a night tonight, I might have to blend multiple shots to get anything at all. This peak is now no longer covered, but it's not much light on it at all. Iron's in there drinking, making soup. Yeah, now there's some touches of light back in there. Gonna fire a few more off here, see what I can get. Man, that hike today was a badass hike. Started out really low in old growth rainforest down in the river valley. Kind of just meandered up out of the forest, slowly climbing the walls that come down on both sides of the river valley. And then finally we reached the end of the river. So basically we're in a basin, and all the snow that sits in this basin and builds up in the winter just melts, and that is the entire source of the river we just hiked up. So it's really cool to see the kind of geography. Nice, that one has that peak coming through. But the geography from really down low, and as it slowly builds, everything just transitions at all different times of year. So I like to come to places in the winter, spring, summer, fall, and every time you come in a different season, it's a whole different landscape. So always a new thing to explore. Let's get in touch with a little bit of light now. Maybe I'll zoom in and get some close crop right on that peak back there. Yeah, some nice light back there now. And another thing I can do, let's see what the settings were on that. So ended up being 1 second. Maybe if I shorten up the shutter speed a little bit, I'll get some more of that cloud detail down there, and I can bring it out a bit with luminosity mask in Photoshop. Let's drop the shutter speed now is 1.6. I'm just gonna go up to ISO maybe 200, and then I'll drop the exposure by half or 2/3 of a stop. Yeah, that gives a bit more cloud detail. A lot of times when I'm shooting, even like at a second shutter speed, if the clouds are moving through really fast down in the valley, you can't really see where the light hits all the edges and gives them like a fine molded detail. But if you get out of that second shutter speed range and make it faster, normally you can see the light kind of hitting the edges and gives it a lot more detail you could work with in the foreground. So sometimes it would look nice to average all that out with a longer exposure, but in this scene, for this sake, the composition's kind of dead down in there, so I'm going to work with the details of that shorter shutter speed. Some nice clouds moving through there now. See how long this battery lasts. It is freezing cold. I can just watch the meter on the front of it drop as I'm recording this video. But I'm going to set up another composition, zoomed in a little bit further, and see what I can do. So now I got it zoomed in a bit further. I am at a little bit over 100 millimeters right now. But this area back in here is starting to catch some really nice glow after the sun dipped down. So I have it focused right approximately at the hyperfocal. So if I can find a high contrast line, you see like where those trees merge right into those clouds. If you just drop your focus box on that and use back button focus, the autofocus will find that focal point really easy. So anytime I can find that high contrast, I use it. Same settings as before, trying to stay faster than a second so I can keep that detail down there.
Alright, so let's take a look at this second image, and I'm using a lot of the same techniques in this image as I did with the previous one. So I have my anchor down here, label that A, and then the leading line in this one is a lot different than before. I kind of have this area right here, and then it grabs these clouds and moves back through. And as you'll see in the subsequent shooting steps, I'm going to take multiple different exposures and make this cloud detail look different in each of those exposures. So some of the detail will be much more than you see right here, and I can use that to induce interestingness in this part of the image. So I think the eyes will still start down here, and they will move up along this region till they get here, and then they will probably shoot up here, of course, and then exit out this way. So this is nice added detail. It's not going to make the image, but I think without it, you would just have all white in the lower parts of the image, and there wouldn't be a transition from dark to light up here. I also like that this is very saturated, so I'll really be able to bring out this saturated color in post-processing. And this is desaturated, so that also causes a transition. When your eyes are moving from dark to light, then they hit a desaturated area, and they'll want to look for, or they'll be attracted to, another saturated area in the image. So if I break this up for interestingness again, I have saturated mountains in the top. That's interesting. In the subsequent exposures, I will capture detail down here. Man, my handwriting's fantastic on this. So this will be interesting with those exposures. And then I have this anchor point and the leading line. And you'll see in the image review at the end, I also captured some other images of this same composition where you can see these trees a bit more. So I can kind of blend those both together. But that's kind of what I was looking for when setting up to shoot that image. And then I just sat around and waited for this to clear so I would have a very interesting peak in the scene. If this wasn't here, the image would be gone. So I really like how this one turned out, but let's jump back to the shooting technique.
I really like how this cloud's kind of starting to filter into that. So that ended up being shot at ISO 200, f11, and 1/3. I'm going to try one at the correct exposure, meaning exposed to the right, and see how that looks as far as the clouds. The last one was way underexposed, but I don't really want to crank the ISO up too much further, so kind of just trying to balance those back and forth. Oh, this one's my favorite one of the night so far. See how that looks. That's a cool looking shot. Yeah, that's killer. Let's zoom in and make sure everything's in focus. Foreground looks solid. Those icy trees just look cool. And then peaks look sharp. That's a keeper. See the moon starting to come up right there. It's lighting up all these peaks back here. But I was sitting in my tent and eating my soup, looking out the window, and it started getting really colorful on the peaks. So I guess as the sun dropped, it probably got right in an area where there are clouds, and then it hit like a gap, and then there are clouds again, so it was just shooting through for like 10 minutes. But I was shooting a new composition, which I'll show you guys on my computer when I review these, but one of my favorite compositions I've ever shot up here, actually. I have this on the left hand side, so it's basically framed right here. It's got these really nice snow detail in the foreground. That peak I was shooting earlier in the back center, and then the light was hitting all on here, so that kind of like held together this side of the frame and pushed the eyes back towards there. But I'm pumped to see what I can do with this photo back on the computer. Usually that's what happens. That's why I said I always get out of my tent and start shooting, and then eventually just do it repetitive times again and again and again. And out of those times, you'll probably get something 5% of the time, and then you'll be pumped. It's better than sitting in the tent.
So let's go through a few of the images that I took real quickly. So we have our camp here. I took this in the afternoon when we just got to camp. And I probably won't use this for anything but a memory. And then here's our camp at night under moonlight. Pretty cool looking as well. These peaks were just having avalanches cross or crash down off of them the whole night. It's pretty cool. You can see actually an avalanche going right here, a small one. And then the next one, I was out after the sunset shooting this one for a while, and I think this is the one I'm going to end up using. This is probably my favorite image from the trip. I haven't edited it yet besides just balancing out the color, but I really like the foreground detail. You can see all the stars, or the moonlight, I should say, glittering down here in the foreground. Here's the other one that I took. I like this one more for the sky part up here where the clouds are coming in, but I don't like how it doesn't include as much of the foreground as this one. So I might end up combining these together, using the sky potentially from this one and the foreground from this one. Never seems to work out perfectly. So I like that one. This one, it's not really too much good balance going on, so I'm not going to use that one. I do like how all this fog is kicking up and rolling through here. These are some really cool mountains to hike up in. I've hiked up all through these areas. But just an awesome location. Then the next one is just our tent. I just took that for a memory. That was right after sunset. And then we have a few of these here. And these are the ones that I took at the very end of the night when I said the sun started peeking back through. So for this one, I ended up taking one exposure to focus down here in the foreground because I wanted to make sure this snow was really sharp. And then after I got that one, I waited as some of these clouds rolled through. You can see it really lights up in that one. So I might end up editing this one in the future. It'll take some color work. It's definitely got a really blue color cast right now, but I'll probably darken down a lot of the sky and just really accentuate this area right here. And then here was the other one I was shooting. Not a huge fan. Pretty cool clouds down in the valley. There was a crop version of it, but it's just not that great. There's not that much color in this shot. I think if I shot it the next morning when I could see sunlight hitting this face, it would be a lot more interesting. But the next morning was perfectly clear. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that shoot out in the mountains. I was out there for 3 more days and didn't really get anything beyond what I got on that very first day of shooting. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I'll see you next time.